Well, is it? Yes, it's right. So hi, everyone. My name is Ileana Pulu, and I'm from the San Francisco Public Library. And my co-presenter here, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Sean Ferguson, and I am from the New York Public Library at the manager for the Chatham Square branch, which is in Chinatown.
And we're here to talk a little bit about the Bicoastal Book Club and Beyond, which is a partnership program series that we worked on bicoastally. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's our contact information and our positions if you need those. And I wanted to start at the end because starting at the end is what librarians do. No, just kidding. But I did want to start at the end because I wanted to just share a little bit about the end product. Sean and I worked with a planning team on creating a virtual experience for 8th graders on 2 separate coasts, in Chinatown in San Francisco and in Chinatown, based on Chinatown in San Francisco and Chinatown in New York. And we had an experience with Melinda Lowe, who's the author of Last Night at the Telegraph Club, and Ed Lin, who wrote David Tung Can't Have a Girlfriend Until He Gets into an Ivy League college. I wanted to start at the beginning, and then I wanted to offer Sean an opportunity to share a little bit about where it actually started from the first moment. So Sean, go ahead, take it away.
Great, thanks, Ileana. This came out of us working in sort of virtual programming world during the pandemic. We had been running a pretty successful Asian American Authors in Conversation program that we were doing monthly. And, we were having a hard time getting our young adult contingent involved with our programming. And so, I was having a meeting with my YA team, and it was, we were thinking of things, and the meeting was over, and one of my librarians had just finished reading the Melinda Lowe book and was just raving about it. And she was so excited and she kind of started telling me about it, and then it takes place in Chinatown in San Francisco. And, and I was like just feeding off the enthusiasm. And then I was just like, why don't we connect the coast? I mean, if we can get our kids to read about Chinatown in San Francisco and find a book that takes place in our own Chinatown, and then we can bring these things together and show the kids how similar they are and so many miles apart. And that's kind of how it started. And then I had my YA team find the most recent book they could that took place in New York Chinatown, and they, not within 15 minutes came up with the Ed Lin book that had only been out just for a little bit. And so then we just went about cold calling San Francisco Public Library to see if they would be as excited and interested as we were. So we actually Googled it and found the Chinatown branch, and we actually called, but nobody answered because I think they were closed during that part of the pandemic. So, we then I found some emails and started just emailing people that I thought were the appropriate people that were at the Chinatown branch there in San Francisco. And we didn't hear anything for a little while. And it turns out that the email was being bounced around until it found the appropriate person. And that's when it got to Ileana and to Christy. And that's how it started. And then we had a meeting, and we shared our story. And once they were on board, then it was just a matter of contacting the authors and letting them know what this exciting program was, and then sending our YA librarians out to the educators to see if we could get the students involved as well, which that didn't take much of anything, but it took longer to get in contact with San Francisco Public Library. But once we did, I mean, we just both had such mutual admiration for each other's institutions and for this project idea. And so then from that point on, it was just the enthusiasm, I think. You want to add anything to that, Ileana?
Yes, that's it. So, I mean, takeaway number one is cold calls work, right? Like cold emails will work if you're patient, if you're persistent and you're patient, because exactly, we're on two different coasts. We don't know each other. We're in two different time zones at the time. The pandemic is happening in everywhere, but it's affecting us in different ways in terms of our library systems and our communities. And it was just exactly how Sean kind of mapped it out. Our Chinatown branch at the time was closed to the public, and our staff were coming back from doing some contact tracing, and they were kind of scooting it around as well, trying to figure out, could we do this? Is it a fit for us at this time? And they sent it over to the team that I work with, and we thought, oh, this has legs, but summer just finished, and how are we gonna figure this out now, you know? But we were able to connect, and we realized that we can't do anything without fantastic partners. So we brought in our school district, our head of our SFUSD school libraries, and my street sweeper is going by, so apologies for that, as well as our new friends over at New York Public, as well as San Francisco Public. So it really was from an idea to a series, and we'll talk a little bit about each of these things, but we'll see, and then we'll show you some photos that we shared and drop some links in the chat if you were interested in seeing those. But to Sean's point, I think the strength of New York Public Library plus the strength of San Francisco was able to make this happen. The monthly author series that he mentioned and being Chinatown based, that was really compelling for us to jump on. And at that moment, we had really learned how to do some strong virtual programming. And we thought, what's fantastic is the accessibility that we now have to authors that are not in our time zones and that may not be able to travel to us. And our schools were just starting to kind of get back in person, and they're continuing to build their relationships. So bringing in those key partners, having standing meetings, even if it's just to check in, even if it's just like, actually, we don't have an update, but we'll email updates, and prepping early and often. And that really saved us during the surges that happened in the spring, because we had everything kind of ready to go from the fall. So what we did was we found our school partners. This is a map of San Francisco, and these are 3 middle schools, Marina, Roosevelt, and Hoover. Our Chinatown, the closest middle school is, I think, Francisco, and the closest high school is Galileo, but a lot of our Chinese community is spread throughout San Francisco, and they do return to Chinatown for community functions, shopping, events, so they do still have roots there. And Sean can just say a little bit about this one.
Yeah, and so these are two of our middle schools that we already had established relationships with. They're very close. They're in Chinatown basically, and so it wasn't much of an effort to get those teachers on board, because we'd already been working with them. It was just a matter of this being an extracurricular activity, but the teachers were so excited to have this kind of experience for their students, and the free books.
Yeah, the free books. So that actually goes well into logistics and facilitation, because there were a lot of logistics to manage. We started meeting up. We had started meeting up in the fall of 2021, and we set a schedule for the series to happen in January, where we had our educators have a meetup, and then we started with a team mixer in February. Logistically, we wanted every single team that participated to have a copy of each book. So we also worked with our acquisitions and our collections departments to make that happen, plus any kind of delivery, which ends up being from the teacher librarian coming and picking up the books, or the librarians going to the schools and delivering the books. And then we had the author visits that happened via YouTube we'll Zoom and stream to YouTube with Ed Lynn and Melinda Lowe, and then a final mixer in May to kind of wrap it up, get the team's feedback, and see what they thought. Sean, do you want to speak to kind of the logistics piece?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, once the ball got rolling, I think that it was really important to have these sort of deadlines set. For one for the students themselves, they needed the structure of it, I think, but also without the deadlines, like we had to get on our acquisitions teams and make sure that like these books were being purchased and delivered in time for the kids to read them. So there was a lot of coordination that was involved, and we met like pretty much weekly once things got rolling as administrators of this program, not with all the kids, just to make sure that things were all moving forward. And it really did, like Ileana said, it paid off in the end, because the programs themselves went very smoothly once we actually were executing them.
So we used a lot of different tools, right? We used Google Docs, we used Google Slides, we used Zoom, and we streamed to YouTube, but we also used everybody's calendars, like the school calendars, all the tests that happened, all the, all the holidays,
all the holidays, yeah. No, there was a lot of navigating.
Yes, and staff, and COVID is still very much happening. There were multiple surges that were happening on both coasts. So we also were kind of working through those as well, logistically. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to mention was authors, right? So we also had to be flexible in terms of what availability the authors have that can offer us. Melinda Lowe was the hottest thing. She's the hottest thing. And we definitely wanted her to be involved, and Ed Lynn as well. And Ed Lynn, he's like a New York Public Library friend, right? Like, he was like, yeah, whenever.
Yeah, he was really easy. And we actually had reached out to Melinda before she started winning all the awards. So like, I feel like we were really lucky that we got in and she kind of agreed to it before. Because I remember when she wrote me was a day she just got, it was just announced that her book received one of the big awards. And so like, that was one of the big, I got to respond immediately and be like, congratulations, we just heard, but I wonder what would have happened once the fire started, whether she would have had time for us.
Well, we see some questions. Maybe should we take questions as we go through, or should we wait till the end? Could we wait till the end?
Yeah, let's just wait till the end.
Okay, so we'll
answer all the questions. Yeah.
So again, our first event was with author Ed Lynn, and what we did was we gathered questions from the teens before the program so that we were ready for that. And an idea from New York was to have the San Francisco staff interview the New York author, and then vice versa, right? So then have a New York staff interview the San Francisco author. So we were able to, Ed Lynn did a quick talk, and then we were able to just get in with the students' questions, with the teens' questions. And that's really responsive to be able to ask a question in the moment, plus have prepped questions that Ed knows. And it was a great conversation. And you can find those on YouTube. Like I'll add the links when we start doing the chat. But we did that. And when we did the presentation, we also shared maps. We felt like mapping was really important when you're working with two different coasts, two different areas, and just like the setting of the book, plus where the setting of the book within New York and how it's related to the libraries and to the schools.
Yeah, and all these particular photos, I believe some of them were just because of the libraries themselves that were involved, but these are all things that were mentioned specifically in the book, just so you can see the proximity.
And then we did the same thing with Melinda Lowe. So Elizabeth at New York Public was able to interview Melinda Lowe with student questions and questions in the moment. So any questions that came up at that time. And so again, we have a a map of San Francisco with Chinatown and North Beach, and then kind of key points throughout the city in the novel and related to the schools. So it was able to offer a little bit of perspective that way. And in terms of evaluating, we had our final mixer, and these are some of the kind of the key takeaways that happened. The teens, they really liked being able to connect with their peers. At the final mixer, they were asking each other questions like, what's BART? Like, how do you get to Oakland? And is the subway like free? They were asking all these different questions to each other. And they also, throughout the series, were sending snail mail to each other. They were sending like postcards or little candies from a local shop. They did want more author interaction. And this was a piece in terms of virtual programming that that was interesting because we wanted the Zoom spaces to be safe for the teens. We didn't want it to be open to the public necessarily, but we did want to stream the author interviews so that anybody can access those. But because of that, we were, in order to keep it a safe space, we had to put in some security measures that stopped more author interaction. So that's a takeaway. We're trying to, work through that. In terms of our educators, they did like the opportunity to use the novels as teaching tools. As Sean mentioned, they were in extracurricular activities. They were after school over in New York and during lunchtime book clubs in San Francisco. So both extracurricular activities, but they were able to kind of bring them in. And the educators just wanted more time. They were just like, we're busy, but we love this, but we want more time, So I don't know how we fix that. Maybe something to think about. And then our planning team, we really liked building and strengthening the relationships that we have here with San Francisco Unified, the two library systems, San Francisco, New York. I assume also the New York and the local schools like New York Public, strengthening those partnerships and just reiterating how important that bond is. And then we also heard feedback about extending this to other library systems or schools or countries. And logistically, I'm like, I don't know about that, but I love where we're going with it. I love that idea. Anything, Sean, you'd like to mention here?
I think one thing that's probably important is I don't know if this idea would have even occurred to us had we not lived through the pandemic, which forced us to go with more virtual programming. I think had this idea occurred to us, you might have been thinking about the logistic, like, can we make this a giant field trip? Can we raise funding for the kids to go? But I think the pandemic and all the virtual programming we're doing really made this seem like a much more viable idea. And I think that's, for the good things that came out of this,
Definitely. And I think they did want a field trip after. I think they were like, well, now we have friends in New York and now we have friends in San Francisco. So let's do that. Let's make that happen. And so I do hope that they
not with library funding.
No, not with library funding or friends, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, that was great. And then now it's time for questions. So maybe I'll stop screen share so we could just see, or should I just leave this up? We'll just see everybody's names. Okay, I'll stop screen share. Stop share. All right, so maybe we go from the top, the first couple questions that we saw.
Darlene asked, how many books did you purchase and who paid for the books?
Good question. So in terms of attendance from San Francisco, we had about 30 teens, 30 to 40 teens. So that's how many books we had. And we had a San Francisco Public Library paid for those books and gave them to the teens as giveaway.
And
Sean?
same for who paid for the books. It came out of programming budget, and we bought 75 because we had a few more students that were involved, a few more classes that were.
I'll ask the next question. Did public libraries pay the authors? Did schools assist with costs?
The authors did this for free because they also thought it was a great idea, I think. And it, of course, I mean, I know Ed, just because we know him more personally, you know, he was really, really enthusiastic about the idea. And, you know, I think it just encouraging kids to read, and also I think he realizes the importance of having some real interactions with students who might fancy themselves writers, or like I think it was, the whole thing was very inspiring.
And we wanted it to be as less barriers as possible for our schools to participate. And already logistically, there was a lot there. So we were really just offering it to the schools. All we asked in return was their participation. So we didn't want to ask them to do anything else. Between New York and San Francisco, we would have figured it out if something came up. And then I wanted to also mention that these were not necessarily their like bread and butter author talks as well. They didn't do a slideshow. They didn't do like a author kind of presentation, which also left it a little bit more open for us to continue having them on our YouTube channel. Sometimes authors they'll, you know, this is one night only, or this is for a week, or the retention of them may or may not be within 30 days or something like that. And they were like, you can leave them up because they're just Q&A and they're from the teens. And I think that's really special that we were able to do that. Okay. So we did the one about the money.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
With evaluations.
Mm-hmm. We did this in our final mixer with the teens. We had pointed questions via survey, and we took their feedback that way.
And then we took notes on that final mixer as well, when the kids were just actually, because we didn't record it for the public, it was like kids were actually able to be on screen and see each other. And which was great, and that they had some comments there too.
Yeah, and after a while, they got a little bit more talkative. You know, at first they were like crickets, and then after a while they were like, "Well, what about this? And how about Chicago? And what about a country? A Western? I don't know." They were just saying kind of all these things. You know, so inspiring, great work. Thank you. Could you see something similar working for adults?
Why not?
Yeah. I think adult book clubs, I feel like, is what I think of and I read Melinda Lowe's book in an adult book club. We were all, you know, very much in kind of the youth world, but I totally think this could work in terms of adult and for youth, for younger. It depends on the type of book, right? Of course.
And the commitment of the teachers, like, or at least in this case, it's
and then when you talk about educators needing more time, what did you mean? So like a couple of specific things come to mind. When we set the date for the mixer, for the first mixer in, I think, February, what the educators wanted to do was like take pictures of their school, have kind of trivia about like each school in each city and share it. They wanted to kind of do this whole project in terms of introducing themselves, not just like a regular icebreaker. They wanted to do that. And that's fantastic. But there was not enough time for them to do that in terms of when there was a COVID surge, when there was time off, when there was holidays. So that's what I mean when they wanted more time. They were like, oh, this sounds amazing and we love it, but the principal just asked for our room for the lunch period or whatever, so I can't do it today. Sean, what about you? Did you guys hear anything else? Anything?
No, that was, I mean, it was funny because there was so much, we were navigating around testing and spring breaks and winter break. I mean, it just seemed like there was always these big chunks of time that that teachers weren't going to be with the students, and that we also couldn't plan, you know, because in San Francisco side there was testing going on that was different than New York side. So to find that one moment when they could all do it took some planning, definitely.
And then, did students read together? How often did students in the book club meet? So in San Francisco, they met weekly for their book club, their lunch book club. And each of there were 3 different schools. So actually, they might have met bi-weekly at another school, but they had the due date of the author visit, so they had to read it by then, and they did.
Yeah,
Sean, do you
same.
have any insight into?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right for New York side too.
Yeah. Okay, in a general sense, do most authors charge to do events like this? New librarian, hi, new librarian. Is it usually a big hit to the budget? I have a book club and I'm always looking to expand, do more with it. I have a take on it, and then Sean, but Sean, you do your take and I'll do mine.
I mean, I find that a lot of authors will do these kinds of things for free because of the interaction with the students, and I guess in a sense we're also by buying as many books as we did, it's sort of paying them in, you know, in one way. So I think that the authors see that. The authors are very well aware that, especially when we're dealing with kids and children's programming or even young adult programming, that there's not always the biggest budget. So they're pretty usually understanding of that.
Yeah, and to that point, like if you have a budget and you can offer it, and it's not going to take a hit, then please do, because you do want to support your authors.
That's right.
And exactly, we purchased say 100 of their titles, for both of the authors. It's pretty good too. And I also just wanted to mention, I kind of had like this thought that in terms of virtual, we are able to, authors are offering that. They do need to do prep and they do need to do the event. So consider their time, but they are available in a different way now in terms of virtual visits. And you can also gather your group somewhere, and like in your library, and then stream the author in, or in your school and stream the author in. By the end of the program, like in May, our libraries had been open. The Mix is the teen space at the San Francisco Public Library, and one of the book clubs came to the Mix and did this program from there. So there's opportunities there to do that.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes you just have to ask. I mean, a lot of authors do charge, but sometimes you just have to ask.
Love this. I want to find a way to do something similar. Is there any online place to sign up so others who are interested can talk about how to plan this? I would love to have students from another state. Good question. I don't know. I mean,
website idea?
yeah, website. I don't know. If you find one, please tell us.
Yeah.
Because we want to do that too. Thank you, everybody, for being here and for being engaged, and sharing the knowledge, because that's really what this is. Like, we all we met each other and we shared what we knew, and we took it from there. You can find it on YouTube, but I wanted to just pop in the links here. So, but you can also find it. But thank you. I think we're at time. But and you have our contact information.
Yeah, if you have any other questions. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have fun. Bye.
Awesome. Great job, guys. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
Okay, cool.